Today, as we commemorate Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, we pause to honor the memory of the 6 million Jewish lives lost during one of the darkest periods in history. This solemn day serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of remembrance, reflection, and resilience. The Holocaust stands as a stark testament to the depths of human cruelty and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It is a chapter that must never fade from our collective memory, ensuring that the lessons learned are never forgotten. As we reflect on this poignant day, we also find ourselves amidst ongoing events in Israel, where the resilience and determination of the Jewish people continue to shine brightly. The challenges faced are a solemn reminder of the importance of unity, empathy, and unwavering support for one another. In the face of adversity, it is crucial that we stand together, supporting each other with compassion and understanding. Let us draw inspiration from the survivors and the memories of those lost, striving to build a world where tolerance and acceptance triumph over hatred and division. Together we honor the past and strive towards a future where the lessons of history guide us towards a more compassionate and just world. May the memory of the victims be a blessing and a beacon of hope for generations to come. I would like to acknowledge Holocaust Education Committee co-chairs, Carrie Molesky and Lisa Dodone-Wiener. Thank you both for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge Robbie Schaefer, the child of a Holocaust survivor, a singer-songwriter, theater film artist, and current rabbinical student. His musical film, Burst the Silence, which traces his relationship with his father, was screened here in Wilmington this past January. In addition, he is the founder of One Voice, an international nonprofit that unites and empowers youth through music and the creative arts. The organization was active from 2011 to 2023 and completed projects in Tanzania, Nicaragua, India, Greece, and Israel. His Life After project focuses on turning the stories of Holocaust survivors and their children into original songs that explore the intersection of trauma and resilience. I would now like to introduce Steve Gonzer, who has been instrumental in coordinating tonight's program. I am grateful for Steve's leadership and his ongoing commitment to Holocaust education. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate that. Before we start the program, I would just like to say a few words. Some of them Seth already had said, but Yom HaShoah is a time to remember the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, a time to never forget the consequences of hatred, discrimination, and indifference. Anne Jaffe, of blessed memory, one of the last Holocaust survivors, one of the last Holocaust survivors living in the state of Delaware, passed away on April 20th. Anne Jaffe, of blessed memory, was a dear friend of mine for more than 30 years. She is what we call in Yiddish an Eishes Chayil, which means a woman of valor. She was even more than that. She was an Eishes Chayil to the truest sense of the phrase, and her warm and loving soul will live on in the hearts of thousands of Delawareans, students and others who have been touched by her courage, spirit of human resistance, and gentle ways. I want to express my deepest heartfelt thanks to Rebecca, Linda, and David Jaffe for being with us tonight and sharing their love. That wasn't planned, but I did it anyway. Okay, and now I would like to recognize people in the audience who are dignitaries. I'm looking for people, I don't see them, but nevertheless, I'm really honored, and we should all be honored to have the Lieutenant Governor, Bethany Holong, with us tonight. And I would like to introduce her to say a few words.
Thank you, Steve, and to the committee. I really came for the remembrance, but also the Jaffe family. I won't go into detail. I know Representative Heffernan is not here yet, but she is a great influence to many of us in the General Assembly. And for those who don't know, I've had the privilege of working with Steve and many of you from the Federation, from the JFS, from the JCC, in your remarkable work. And nothing more important than around Holocaust education. And I know myself and others supporting Representative Heffernan when she passed legislation educating our young children, our middle school children, of the importance of remembrance. And the times that we've gone through since I know we gathered here in October under the pavilion and where we are today, I am here on behalf of the state of Delaware and to say how much we embrace the community and how important it is to remember, to stand against hate, to stand for unity. And as a nurse professor, Dr. Janice Seligman, many of you know her and her family, when they brought me back to Delaware to be a professor here home, it was really about taking care of our whole community. And so tonight, thank you for hosting and having me here for part of the Holocaust Remembrance. It is such an important time for resiliency, for hope as we do remember the seriousness. On a note of humility, I am just so humbled that I had the opportunity to know Ann Jaffe. And when I was asked to give a couple moments of comments on behalf of the state of Delaware around Ann, I said absolutely. Knowing especially her daughter Becky, and I know her other family members that are present, she was strong, she was caring, she was kind. She was someone, when she walked in the room, she was present. And her presence spoke volumes. And she was not in any way unwavered in sharing the story of the Holocaust. The stories she shared with the children were so impactful. And I know, and I see Rabbi Beals, who leads my Faith Leaders Calls that I host. Thank you, Rabbi, for leading my Faith Leaders Calls. You and I have had those conversations. It takes strong people. And Ann Jaffe was that type of a woman. And she was such a remarkable leader. I can't wait this evening to help honor her on behalf of the state. Many of you may not have known, very few women get inducted into the Delaware Hall of Fame. Ann Jaffe was inducted into the Delaware Hall of Fame. And it is because of her, we are a better community, we are a better state. And I just want to say to the family, thank you for sharing. Our love and sympathy continues with you on behalf of us, and we are here to support. And again, on behalf of the state of Delaware, please know how much we value and support the Jewish Federation, the community, and neighbors. So thank you, Steve, for allowing me a few moments of time to express the sincere appreciation and sympathies.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. For many years, Ann Jaffe was very much involved in a project called the Ulster Project. This project unites Northern Ireland students with Delaware students. What we're about to see now is a video excerpt of one of her appearances back in July of 2015. It's a magnificent video. Ann has done this over and over again. It was one of her favorite projects. She always was willing to step up to the plate to be at the Ulster Project. So we did a short excerpt, so enjoy it.
The Ulster Project Delaware Incorporated is a vital program that unites young people in the communities of Delaware and Northern Ireland. For more than 40 years, Ulster Project has offered a haven for teens from Northern Ireland during the month of July. This sanctuary of space and time has changed and developed over the decades. However, what has remained consistent is a month grounded in friendship, the exploration of peace and tolerance, leadership development, and discovery of self and community responsibility for the young people involved. At a time in our country where divisions are wide and issues of race, religious intolerance, and violence are in the headlines, both locally and internationally, the mission, values, and commitment to community found in Ulster Project Delaware are profoundly important. Ulster Project Delaware Incorporated is committed to helping the youth of today to become thoughtful, compassionate leaders in a divided world. For many years, Ann Jaffe has been a featured speaker and shared her journey as an eyewitness to the events of the Holocaust with hundreds of youth from Northern Ireland. Her message always resonates with the spirit of human resilience, love, and kindness.
My name is Ann Jaffe. I am a retired teacher. I am a mother. My husband is here, Dr. Edward Jaffe, and I have 4 wonderful grandchildren, and I'm also a Holocaust survivor. And I was a child during the Holocaust, and I'll share with you my experience, what it was like to live through the Nazi occupation for a Jewish person. It was 1941, June 22nd exactly, when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. That is when I came under the Nazi occupation, 10 days later. We were really not prepared. Who could have ever believed that one people will want to exterminate another people, not because they fought the war, not because they had different, political ideologies, only because they were born in the Jewish faith. I happen to be one of the lucky survivors, very few, I should say, lucky survivors, because I survived with my parents. And that made a tremendous difference in my life later on after I was liberated. I had someone to turn to. I had someone to teach me right from wrong. And now I'll tell you what it was like when the Nazis marched into my little village. I want you to know the size of my village was about 1,200 people, that's all. Out of the 1,200, we had about 350 Jews. Out of the 350 Jews, 32 have survived the war. And that is a very large number in our area, because there were many other townships much bigger than our village, where there were 1,000 Jews and only 5 have survived. Can you imagine how lucky we feel that out of 350, 32 have survived the war? 10 days later, after they attacked the Soviet Union, they were already in our village. And we were stunned because there was no way of escape. We heard from other refugees that escaped from Western Poland and came into our area, how harshly the Nazis treat the Jews, but we had no recourse. First of all, who could have believed that they will kill every one of us? The only way that we could have escaped would have been into the Soviet Union. How do you escape on a horse and buggy? That's all we had. A few of them tried to, and before they could reach the next town, the Nazi army has already taken them over. The few that did survive are young men who had bicycles, and they got on their bicycles and they drove into the Soviet Union, and there was a handful of them that have survived the war. They are part of the 32 that have survived in my village. What is it that makes one people hate another people to such an extent that when a change of government came about and they have had an opportunity to do it, to collaborate with the enemy against their own citizens, the Jewish people that lived with them peacefully for so many generations? Stop and think where hatred comes from. Because if we will be able to identify the sources, maybe we will be able to eradicate some of it. Does anybody know a little baby, tiny little babies, before they even start to speak, the first words that would come out of their mouth is, "I hate you"? I have not seen any. So you see, when we are very little, we don't know that feeling of hatred. It is only when we acquire it later on in life through teaching, through other methods. Sometimes it's envy, jealousy, whatever it is, but we acquire it as we go along in life. And this is something that can be altered. I want you to know, not only in my country, in Poland, but in all of Europe, at that time, and I emphasize at that time, hatred toward Jews was taught openly. It was taught in the churches, it was taught in school, and it was taught in the homes. And when you teach hatred, even though you do get along later on, you know, in the marketplace and in the fields, it's in you, and you know you point to the other as a hateful person. But the word went out in our village that here is a kind man that is willing to help. And when the final solution came, that one man saved 10 Jews. 9 men and 1 woman found a hiding place in his barn, and later on he made a better hiding place for them, and he kept them for 10 months, fed them and took care of them. There are no words that you could imagine what it meant to those 10 people. They survived the war because of that man. Near the Jewish Community Center, we have a garden. We call it the Garden of the Righteous Gentiles. And of course, I planted a tree. When the war ended and we found out that the whole free world knew what the Nazis are doing, and nobody offered us help, we were extremely, extremely angry. And I myself, I remember, would go around and tell everybody, I hate the whole world, I hate everyone. After all, we don't matter, nobody came to help us. And my father overheard me say that I hate people. And he told me, come here, I have to have a serious talk with you. He says, we were victims of hatred. Did you like it? I said, no, of course I didn't, I hated it. He says, then why would you do this to other people? He says, you will destroy yourself. The people don't care who you hate. They don't even know it. But you will destroy yourself if you continue being angry and hateful. He says, do the opposite. Try to teach by example kindness and tolerance to other people who are different than you are. You will become a better human being. My oldest brother, we found after the war, he escaped from his labor camp and he found us. And he was at that time 20 years old, and he said Israel was just declaring its independence. He said, I'm going to go to Israel, I'm going to fight for the independence of the country. And he stayed there and he lived there the rest of his life. And we were waiting to see where we could emigrate. And my father and mother both had brothers in the United States, and they suggested that we come here. And I remember this is what my uncle said. America is a free country. If you will not like it here, they will let you go wherever you want. And to us, it was inconceivable, a country that will let you out, let you go somewhere, you know. So we decided that that might be a good deal. Only after you have experienced the dictatorship of 2 regimes, the Nazi and the Soviet dictatorship, can you finally appreciate what it means to live in freedom in a free country. And I will forever be grateful that we have found a home in this wonderful United States. Thank you so much for listening.
Before we continue, I'd like to recognize Newcastle County Executive Matt Meyer, who just joined us, and I would like to welcome Robbie Schaefer to the stage for a musical performance.
Doesn't this sound like a miracle? It's waiting in the smallest parts, in the vastness of an ocean, whispered from a refugee heart. And it's not that it's supposed to come easily. We all choke on the simplest truth. Oh, but somehow I can hear them, every hymn that is nearest to you. And I don't know why, I don't know why, but it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like home. And truth is a baby's cry after midnight. It's one part faith and it's one part doubt. Secret lovers on a river, burning fires under bridges, calling out, calling out. And I don't know why, I don't know why, but it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like home. Oh, say shalom bimomam. Oh, yeah, say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imon, v'imon. Swirling dervishes spin on the side of a hill, ecstatic and bursting with holiness, thirsting for someone to feel. And I don't know why, and I don't know why, but it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like, and I don't know why, and I don't know why, but it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like home. Sounds like, yeah, it sounds like home.
Please welcome to the stage Linda Jaffe, Becky Jaffe, and David Jaffe.
It's a sea of friendly faces, thank you all for being here. The first thing I wrote here was, most of you know our mother. I think you all know our mother. People would ask me, do you know how wonderful your mother is? And I'd say, well, yeah, she is our mother. Although the question was asked rhetorically, it's not a silly one, because we all know people that behave differently with family and another way with friends. But Ann Jaffe was a remarkably loving parent and conspicuously positive role model, not just for us, but for everybody. In our eyes, Mom is a hero, not only for surviving the war, but for agreeing to share personal and painful memories that were traumatic. This is what she did. She relived the trauma of survival to educate people about what happened. She was a long-time teacher of Judaic studies. Mom passed on Jewish tradition and a great deal of love to all the students, while also improving her accent and honing her ability to speak in front of diverse groups. Finally, with the love endowed to her by her family, she found a way to share what the Nazis did to her and European Jewry in a way that opened hearts and minds, leaving a positive message that we can all practice in our own lives. In short, Mom inspired everybody she knew. Her father's sentiment regarding hatred and love set the path for our mother's life. And she passed this message on, not only to her family, but to tens of thousands of students that heard her speak or read her book. As children, she kept this history from us, thinking that she could prevent further trauma. But feelings of trauma can be passed down to children in less overt ways. Mother never behaved like a victim, but she did infuse us with the inspiration of kindness. We stand tall and proud to be her surrogate. Hate in any form is self-defeating. It improves nothing and always makes matters worse. Some may argue it's human nature, but we can think and resolve to change any involuntary hatred or negative discrimination with a thoughtful moment, with introspection, a positive learning experience, and ultimately, something good. Mom's book reveals her remarkable parents who lived a lifelong love and a devotion to each other, to their Jewish roots, and their family. They were smart and sincere people, and our mother's mentors. And I think that we can all agree that she has made them proud. We did not know our grandfather, David, for whom my brother is named, but we all knew and loved Chava, his wife. We called her Bobby, a modified Bubby. David wrote a beautiful piece for school decades ago, but we loved it so much that we included it in her book, and I'm going to ask him to read it now.
So this was about 38 years ago. I was in an expository writing class, a college senior, And we were charged with writing an essay about a family member. And I decided without thinking too much that I would write about my grandmother, not thinking that somehow this essay would make its way 38 years later into my mother's memoir. But she decided that she wanted to include it. Obviously, that touched me. And here it is. It's called Bobby. Hello? Okay. My maternal grandmother's first and only conversational language was Yiddish, the tongue of pre-war Eastern European Jewry. My own knowledge of Yiddish is ridiculously informal. While I'm familiar with hundreds of words, I cannot produce one grammatically correct sentence. Still, I understand everything my grandmother ever said to me. Perhaps I understood because of her intonation, her emphasis, or affect. Whatever the reason, I always knew what she meant. Her message was forever something about virtue, piety, or charity. She was endlessly giving something to someone else while never asking for anything in return. This was a woman who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, losing a son to the Nazis, yet her faith in her Creator and in people never diminished. Her courage helped save the lives of many during the war. Every now and then, my mother will recall another incident where my grandmother's astuteness and bravery led to the survival of a few more people. Her common sense was evident even in her old age as she gave sound logical advice to her daughter, my mother. Her name was Chava Swirsky, and we all just called her Bobby because the Yiddish word for grandmother is Bobbe, and Bobby was easier to say. Coming to her house every Friday afternoon was a treat I and my sisters looked forward to during our childhood. Her kindness and love for her family gave her house a warm, comfortable glow that was all ours. Her Sabbath cooking smelled like a dream, and all the children raced to the overburdened stove for a taste of the cholent, kompot, blin, or any one of a dozen other mouth-watering Jewish foods from Eastern Poland. I often wondered if my grandmother's house back in the tiny little white Russian village of Kobylnik smelled the same way. In those days, the meal was cooked on a wood-burning stove in a small framed house located in a typical Jewish shtetl, not unlike Fiddler on the Roof's Anatevka. But the smell was the same. I pictured my mother and her siblings running to the large black pots just as I and my sisters did. I saw the same warm glow of love and reverence for the approaching Sabbath. I imagined my grandmother as a young woman, the spitting image of my mother today. I envisioned her standing over the mystical Sabbath candles, slowly, powerfully, waving her hands thrice in a circular motion, ushering in the Sabbath queen, just as she did so many times before my very eyes. Now, 30 years later, she lived in America. During those 30 years, she saw the very worst in man, but she did not lose her faith in man. She had seen her cousins slaughtered, her neighbors shot, her son murdered, but she knew that to give up her faith or her courage was to hand Hitler a victory he came close to achieving. She would not succumb to the self-destructive trap of bitterness. Despite her personal tragedy, she tried to build a family imbued with the spirit of faith, tolerance, and sharing. She was always there to give a stranger a meal or a bed for the night, and she never called attention to the often laborious deeds of charity and self-sacrifice, which she performed almost instinctively. When she came to America, she worked for a living. She was employed by the Orthodox Jewish community of Elizabeth, New Jersey, to run the ritual Jewish immersion bath, or the mikveh. Everyone knew Bobby as the mikveh lady. Women come to the mikveh for immersion in order to symbolically cleanse their bodies once a month. I used to watch the women enter the building in their customary modest attire and leave looking the same way. I wondered what effect the mikveh had on them. Were they spiritually cleansed? Was the Spirit of the Lord in the water? What was Bobby's part in this ritual? I often walked into the mikveh building when no one was there. Inside was this large sunken bath like a small swimming pool. Pink tiles covered the surface, and 8 or 9 steps led down to the full depth of about 5 feet. I treated it with respect because it held a certain mystical power, which stirred me. I never wondered if Bobby needed to use the mikveh. She seemed exempt to me. She was pious. She did not need the purification. I later realized how appropriate the job of running the mikveh was for Bobby. Her whole life was devoted to cleansing the spirit. The act of loving people and caring for them cleansed her daily. Each wrinkle in her old, beautiful face was not an age line, but a purity line. She taught life's secrets to people who did not speak her language because her spirit's tongue was universal. She possessed the key to life, and I wondered how many people she touched with it. My mother certainly felt her influence. Her love for Bobby was and is everlasting. When Bobby could no longer take care of herself, my mother was there for her day in and day out for weeks at a time. When a stroke affected part of Bobby's face, making her words inaudible, my mother, as if by telepathy, understood all. She stayed with Bobby until the last breath went out of my grandmother's delicate, battle-worn body. Such devotion is rare. But is Bobby's spirit being diluted now? After all, my mother does not go to the mikveh, and none of the children in our family were taught Yiddish, the beautiful but diminishing language. Are we failing her by not doing these things? Is our desire for material things affecting us? I hope not. I think we all have a part to play in promoting her goodness and understanding. It's just a different part, one which I suppose each of us has to find on our own. Recalling the smell of Bobby's kitchen, I also remember another unique smell, not of food, but of her. It was a sweet, pruny scent, which during my grade school years was only enjoyed when I threw my arms around her and kissed her soft, drooping cheeks. On a recent trip home, something surprising yet comforting happened. After years of being without it and almost forgetting it, that smell saturated my nostrils once again as I went to kiss my own mother. At the same time, I noticed my mother's cheeks with that same soft texture and just a hint of Bobby's droop. There she was, before my eyes. She was not one person, but two in one. Perhaps she was 3 in 1 or 100 in 1. I know nothing of my great-grandmother or any other ancestors. But maybe I do. Maybe they all live in my mother and someday will live in me. I don't know. What I do know is that I'm going home more often now.
Even decades later, it still holds up. Mom survived with most of her family, both because of her parents' wise efforts and their tremendous luck. From death house to ghetto, from ghetto to Polish forest for 20 months. Post-war, her family wandered from forest to towns and then several displaced persons camps before leaving Europe. Her story continues in the United States and ultimately to her beloved Wilmington. Her contribution to our Holocaust Education Committee as their primary speaker is unparalleled. I speak for my family at large to convey our gratitude for all the honors and awards she has received, especially because they had nothing to do with influence, politics, or money, only the heartfelt dedication to do what was right. Thanks to Steve Gonzer, Mom was asked to address the Delaware legislature as a survivor to rally the vote for the bill to mandate Holocaust education in Delaware. I'd like to ask Rebecca to read that passage.
My mom joined the Holocaust Education Committee when it first was established in the late 1970s. One of her goals was to persuade the Delaware legislature to institute Holocaust education. In 2020, Steve Gonzer called her to say now he had an invitation to plead the case before the Delaware legislature for mandated Holocaust education. She prepared these words for the address which happened on January 27th, 2020. My name is Ann Jaffe. I am a Holocaust survivor In 1975, my late husband, Edward Jaffe, a chemist with the DuPont Company, was transferred to Wilmington, Delaware. The past 45 years have been the best years of my life. I am a retired teacher of Judaic studies who has made it my life's mission to educate as many young students as possible about the horrors of World War II. I never refuse an invitation from any school, college, or church to share my personal experience of that and the lessons that we can learn from it. To date, I have spoken over 450 times. I am the youngest of all the survivors here in Delaware. I am almost 89 years old. Yesterday was the 75th International Holocaust Remembrance Day. How can people remember something that they never known or witnessed? In written history, 75 years is practically current events. And yet, when I speak to hundreds of students in both public and private schools, many of them know few details regarding the Holocaust. There have been other horrific genocides in history, which we also need to learn and understand. But the Holocaust was a state-sponsored, calculated, and systematic killing of millions of innocent people, among whom were 6 million documented Jews. As legislators, perhaps ask yourself whether you were taught in schools. Just as importantly, as it is my obligation to remember, we must teach that if it happened once, it can happen again. Education is the first step, and I commend you all for elevating the state of Delaware by joining 11 other states that require Holocaust education in schools. When I am gone, I want you to make sure that the future generations of students who learn the history of that period must acknowledge that it happened. We must teach our children the facts. We must help them process these facts in a personal way so they realize this could have been their race, their religion, or their culture. That is what it was, a tragic world event that targeted completely innocent people because an insane dictator came to power while others went along with him and others looked the other way too long. Not only will this help us raise better people and a better world, it will also help Americans better appreciate the freedom that we enjoy in the United States of America. Thank you. As an epilogue, both the House and the State Senate unanimously passed the bill, and it was subsequently signed into law. Delaware became the 13th state to do so, and Mom was present on a pandemic Zoom call when the bill was signed by our Governor, John Carney. Our mother was gratified that one of her missions was accomplished.
It means so much to me to be up here with my siblings doing this. So Mom can no longer speak, which is why writing her memoir was so important to us. First-hand survivors will soon be no more. So we all must be their voice. You all knew her. You know her story. Share it. Suggest this book to others, even to schools, to educate generations to come. Yes, we are the second generation. We are. But we must all of us, be examples of tolerance for the differences between people and advocates for kindness. So, like every survivor is unique, each child of a survivor has their own experience. And we were asked to talk about it a little bit, which is interesting because we really have not done that. And one of the questions that I've been asked in the past is, when did you first learn that your mother had this experience? So I can tell you my answer, but I was wondering whether you guys would like to take the mic and explain when you might have learned.
I don't think that there was a specific moment when I came to realize it, to be honest with you. And I think it was really when she started going out and speaking and then coming home and talking about her experiences in front of students that I started to really absorb what had happened to her. She didn't talk about it when we were young. And she really didn't begin to talk about it even when we were older until she began this mission to educate students from all over the area.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a gradual thing and not something that sort of entered my consciousness particularly.
I support that. That is, I think, a common experience. Rebecca, did you feel the same way?
Probably not. As the oldest, sometimes things are not kept from you as they are from the younger children. And my mother, aunts, uncles used to talk about being in the forest, and I would ask questions, but they would say later, later. So I got to hear stories when I was in 4th and 5th and 6th grade about them not living in a normal house when they were my age at that time, but they had a different experience that they would share with me later. And then aunts and uncles who also survived had similar comments about having a different upbringing than we were having, and that we should just be grateful, always grateful for the United States of America.
I thought that it might be different than my experience as well. I didn't even know that my mother had an accent. You know, I mean, this is all we knew. And somebody said, your mother has an accent. And I said, not my mother, no. And I came home from school and I said, Mom, do you have an accent? And she just laughed. She just laughed. But around the age of 9, I was given a school assignment to interview my parent. Everybody got the same questions. It was social studies. We went home and Mom agreed to sit down at the kitchen table with me and answer some questions. And everything was fine until it came to the question of, what's your nationality? And she said, I'm Jewish. And I was old enough to realize that Jewish is your religion, not your nationality. And she said, absolutely not. We are Jewish. We belong to the Jewish nation. And at 9 years old, this just did not make sense to me. I became frustrated and I said, do you have a passport? She went and she brought the passport and I opened it up and I see that she's Polish. I said, you're Polish. She said, absolutely not. No, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. She said they hated us. I never considered myself Polish. I am part of the Jewish nation. That was my first inkling that something was going on here, but she didn't elaborate, and I was too young and not inquisitive enough to ask on. And also, like David said, I didn't really know. She didn't talk to us about it. Now, I have to point out Faith Brown. Faith Brown is here, and if you've read the book, you know that Faith Brown really is singularly responsible for starting my mother speaking about her experience. And when she did, as David mentioned, I started saying, oh, she's speaking in so many places. What is she talking about? You know, and this is how it became revealed to us. But still, it wasn't on the table. We didn't really talk about it. until we were much older and started reading transcripts for ourselves. Robbie, how about you? Do you want to share when you found out your father was a survivor?
Somewhat similar to you. My father passed away in 2015, and I would say I was in my 40s when I realized he was a Holocaust survivor. He never once called himself that, and he never once spoke about it. And it's funny what you, maybe you all feel like this too, what you simply accept as a kid, the things that you're not told, you just accept that. Yeah. That's, even if in retrospect there are obvious holes there, right? And so I learned much about his story from his older sister, my Aunt Rivka, who's still alive, living in Tel Aviv. But yeah, he never spoke about it. And I think the last time we met, Linda, I think we were talking about this, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier tonight, is that it's amazing what gets passed down through silence. It's extraordinary. And I know a lot of survivors do that, maybe to protect themselves, but also to protect their children. They don't want to burden us with such things. But it comes to us anyway.
Yeah. After you found out and learned more, do you feel like it had an influence? I mean, at 40, you're a mature adult, and you have developed. Did you feel that it kind of altered anything for you?
Yes, it did. But by the time I started to realize all of this, my father was sick. He had Alzheimer's, and so there was never any talking with him really about that. But yes, I very much. It's kind of what my film was very much about, which is that there were all these things, all these gaps in our relationship that kept me from fully understanding him and therefore fully loving him in those ways. I always loved him. We were always very close. But and so yes, all of a sudden everything starts to make a little more sense, right? Mm-hmm. And probably for years, I'm sure you guys have felt this way, that for years afterward, oh, that puzzle piece. Oh, that makes sense now. So it's that kind of an experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you guys feel that knowing that Mom survived like this, has it changed? I mean, you're both caregivers, both physicians, but in other ways, has it affected you?
I'm sure it has. I mean, there are books and college courses and fields of psychiatry devoted to this topic, so I'm not going to attempt to explain it to anyone at this moment.
Becky, do you want to add anything?
Well, for me, it was the fact that I can't hide my emotions very well. And so in high school, when we learned about the Holocaust, I would be the one crying. And I attempted to take a course in college on the Holocaust, and the professor, after the second class, asked me to drop the class because my crying was just too distracting for all the other students.
See, I didn't know that story. Well, I personally, most of you know how close I was with my mom. I helped her write her story. And I always felt that when she won't be able to speak, if anybody wanted to listen, that I could tell her story. Of course, it'll never be the same. I mean, one time she was not feeling well, so she called me and asked me if I would drive to Philadelphia and speak in her place. And I was a basket case. I thought, I can't do this. She gave me a handful of notes, Somebody drove me up there, and my heart was pattering. But when I got there, are the Wagmans here? Yes, Sylvia's mother was standing on the stage speaking. And my knees almost, went out from under me. I said, I'm here to speak for Aunt Jaffe. They said, oh, no offense, but we always take a survivor before a second generation. Yeah, and I was grateful. I was so grateful. But I've been talking to Steve and people on the Holocaust Education Committee about this moment. Here we are. The survivors are disappearing, and how do we go on? So I know my mother's story. I have a little story of my own. I'm happy to share it with whomever is interested. I don't know, Robbie, you share in your music, which is amazing and so heartfelt. Any other comments? No? We can take a question or two from the audience if somebody has something. Rabbi Beals.
First of all, thank you for being here and elevating this day up, which could have been just like any other day, and you made it special by putting yourself into it. So I won't speak for them because that's chutzpah. I'll speak for me and just say, Rachel, of all my heart for doing it. I want this day to be unique and kadosh, set aside from all the other days, and you did that. So just for me, I thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my shaila, here's my question. The four of you now have a way of looking back now, but if you look at the way you were raised as children, is there a hint now, or remnant, of something that you think that maybe is unusual, in the way that you were raised by a Holocaust surviving parent that maybe was different from the way your children were raised? And then my part two would be, is there any takeaway from that and how your parenting skills may have been impacted?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Our parents were extremely protective, which you can understand, extremely, almost to a fault. But just from my own experience, when we moved to Delaware, I was 15 years old, and I met some nice friends, and they said, hey, Linda, you want to come out, go camping with me? And I said, I've never gone camping. And I came home, and I said to my mom, Mom, can I go camping? And she looked at me like, why would you want to do that? No bed, no roof, and I really was not fully cognizant of her experience at the age of 15. But I said, yeah, I felt like they invited me, I want to go. And after I went, I thought to myself, I didn't really need to do that. But I am, you tend to model your parents, and I'm afraid that I have been a protective parent and marveled at other parents that I see, kids falling or on the precipice of falling, and they're cool and calm and collected. I could never do that. I was always hovering over the kids. But as my children grew up and became adults, they were able to say to me, Mom, back off, and that I could hear, and it helped me evolve as a parent, as I still am today. Becky, do you want to?
I think the legacy of gratitude and always leading with gratitude is something that I hope that I have imbued in my children. I don't think I was as protective as you were, because curiosity is also part of my nature, and so trying to be curious yet grateful is the way I hope my children have evolved.
Nice.
I would have to agree with you, Linda. For our father in particular, always, it was very important for him to protect us from having any experiences that might bring us harm.
Oh, yeah.
And, the parenting styles nowadays is you let a child fall and you let them get up,
Yeah.
and they build a certain kind of resilience from that. Mm-hmm. And for us, it was, you learn from watching other people make mistakes, not from you making them yourself. And that was very real in our upbringing.
Yes, absolutely. Rob, do you want to mention anything?
Yeah, you just made me think of two things when you were speaking about that. One is I remember on 9/11, or just after 9/11, my father called us over to his house, and we sat down, and on the dining room table he had a shortwave radio. And he said, "I just want you to know I have a plan."
Wow.
And he described the whole thing. And I thought, you are crazy. I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, yes, 9/11 is horrific, but they're not coming for us here. That's not, but
Yeah.
no, he had a plan. And, but the second thing you made me think about was both he and my Aunt Rivka, and much like your mother, the joie de vivre, the optimism,
Yeah.
is astounding to me. It still astounds me. My Aunt Rivka earned her master's when she was 75.
Wow.
Because she hadn't gone to school till she was 13, and she decided that was one of her two answers to the Nazis, the other being her 9 great-grandchildren, right? And so, but my father too. My father loved life, and he was joyful, and he was kind of a court jester, and he loved this country, just like your mother did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of that has been passed down to me. It's such a lesson.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I think we're done here. I just want to say that almost 3 years ago, Seth and Steve said, "There's this guy out there, Rob Schaefer. He's a musician," and I've always been a sucker for a musician. I said, "Yes, I'm going to meet him," and he came and he interviewed my mom, and so beautifully wrote a song from that. So I'll let you introduce the song. Thank you.
So yes, the only time I met Ann Jaffe was that afternoon at her house, and I interviewed her and I interviewed Linda. You know, when maybe you're taking a walk and you come across a butterfly and you stop and you're afraid to breathe because it might go away? That's what sitting with your mother was like. I didn't want to make a noise to interrupt what was happening in front of me, and this being of light that was sitting across from me. And I think I love what you were saying earlier, Rabbi. Thank you for that, because I think we don't things aren't sacred in and of themselves. We make them so, right? We sanctify Shabbat when we light candles, when we enter into Shabbat, when we allow Shabbat to descend upon us. And all I know is I left that day feeling sanctified. And so thank you, and thank you, Anne, for that. What a gift. So how do you make a song out of such a story, such a life, you know? But a couple of the things that really stuck out of me from speaking with the two of you, one, of course, hearing Anne talk about her time when her family was living in the woods and speaking, I mean, years. We're not talking a few weeks here. it seems almost impossible, right? And a lot of it, I don't know, I found that she sort of shrugged off a little bit. Oh, but we just did what we had to do. And of course, it really stuck with me, and I know this is a big part of the story that she would tell, is that it was so cold in the winters, you had to make a fire, which might have been dangerous. The smoke might give you away, but these were your choices, right? These choiceless choices. And that there had been a young boy who had wandered away from the fire in the middle of the night, and they found him frozen to death the next day. That really stayed with me for obvious reasons, but the second part, which really stayed with me, was when Anne was talking about after the war, and they were in a DP camp, and an American comedian came to entertain them. He was Jewish, and he showed up, and the first thing he said was, "Can I get a minion?" And I think everybody sort of laughed. Probably, I'm imagining the way you just did was, "That's uncomfortable." And he said, "I'm just kidding." And at least the way Anne told it is, he then announced to everybody standing there that the state of Israel was being born. And she described it and said that they all started sobbing and singing Hatikva. So I wrote this song because I think I got to know her for about 2 or 3 hours. I think most of you got to know her for a lot longer than that. And I wrote this song because it seemed to me her entire life was about hope. And so I wrote it as though it's being sung from her voice. At first about her mother, and then about her daughter. And yeah, it's called Birds on a Wire. Through the crowd comes the voice of America, weightless, unfettered, and free. Can I get 10? Now the joke's on you. You are 10,000 strong, standing in front of me. And we sent up a song to Jerusalem. My mother's voice cracked through the trees. Hope is not lost, we sang. Hope is not lost. And we stuttered like Moses at the shore of the sea. Every time she whispered, every time she kissed me goodnight. Little bird, stay close to the fire. Every time she told me, every time she told me, hang on, we're like birds on the wire. There are things that I never will speak of. There are names I always will say. When there are 10, I think the joke's on you. Here I am, we are still here to say. Every time she whispered, every time she kissed me goodnight. Little bird, stay close to the fire. Every time she'd hold me, every time she told me, hang on, we're like birds on a wire. I hear the voice of America. Sure enough, she's one of my own, flying in from Tel Aviv. Even birds on a wire hold the promise of. Even birds on a wire hold the promise of home. And every time I whisper, every time I kiss her goodnight, little birds stay close to the fire. Every time I hold her, every time I tell her, hang on, we're like birds on a wire. Every time I whisper, every time I kiss her goodnight, little birds stay close to the fire. Every time I hold her, every time I tell her, hang on, we're like birds on the wire. Holding the promise of, holding the promise of home.
Thank you, Robbie. That was awesome. I'd like to introduce Rabbi Yair Robinson to do Kaddish.
It is good to be in a room that does not need to be asked to rise, and who knows its obligation and responsibility. May God remember our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel who gave their lives for the sanctification of the divine name. Here we remind ourselves again that no earth covered multitudes of murdered Jews, that no Kaddish was recited, no kin was left to remember them. Now we pledge to remember. We pledge to bear witness. We join together. Yet Gadal v'yet Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Bi'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'kudusha b'richu, La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom araba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may they be remembered for blessing. We may be seated.
Robbie's going to perform Hatikva for us before we conclude.
Steve said I was going to perform it, but I hope we're all singing it together, yeah. Kol od balev al penima, nefesh Yehudi homiyah. Ein mit Zion, Sophia. עוד לא עבדה תקוותנו, העתיד בא בשנות 40, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Robbie, thank you. I'm speechless. You don't need to hear from me right now. But I do want to recognize Deb Heffernan. Thank you for being here, my friend, our friend. To the Jaffe family, to Robbie, to our dignitaries, our clergy, and to all of you. All I'd like to say is be a butterfly, go out there, spread love, spread kindness, and spread hope, and let's honor Anne's memory. We have refreshments in the back of the room, too.